What is going on YouTube? It is Primitive here, and today I'm going to be bringing you our first BT7 decklist profile. Now today we're going to be having D-Brigade with the new DarkKnightmon package. Something that was very interesting to me when I first saw it, and I knew I had to put it with D-Brigade. D-Brigade is that kind of black base where you can put it with a lot of the more mid-range combos where you're having level 4s, level 5s, maybe going up to level 6s, but the D-Brigade can be a very powerful base for that, especially if you're trying to have a deck that is very aggressive, and the DarkKnightmon does work really well with the D-Brigade because you can go really wide on board, you can play the DarkKnightmon out, and then when it does get deleted, you can play 2 more Digimon out. They do come out suspended, and they are relatively low DP, but if your opponent's getting rid of the DarkKnightmon, they're probably not going to have everything to get rid of the other Digimon on the board, so you can maintain a wide board state, be very aggressive, while also having just the general Rookie Rush style that D-Brigade has. I also am going to be having a side deck for you all here, since we did have the new mechanic announced being tested of the side decks and the mulligans, so I went ahead, have a 10-card side deck for you, and we'll talk about what those side deck cards are and what cards you should potentially be siding out for those matchups. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get on into the deck list. Starting off with the Digitama, we're not doing anything too crazy. We're staying with the 1 Sumamon and the 4 Pagumon. You could have went with the new Digitama egg, which makes it so that when you put a card underneath, you get to draw a card, but we're not going to really be doing that very often, especially because with the DarkKnightmon, you do it with the on-play effect, and so the egg didn't really feel super valuable to me. I decided to just go with the Pagumon, so that way I could get that value, get that draw, and then the Sumamon, so that way you can buff up your Commandramons. You can even buff up if you go up into something like a Skullknightmon, make it a little bit bigger, but mostly just buffing up your Commandramons, most notably the 5k Commandramon, so that way you can get over things like Mechanorimon, which is a card that we'll be talking about multiple times here throughout this deck list, but that's going to be it for the Digitama. Now, we have 19 rookies. We're just going to have the standard 16 Commandramon and then the 3 Hagurumon. Now, there are a lot of cards that you could potentially play in slot of the Hagurumon, but this is a card that I've been very happy with. Playing it in EX1, it's been very impactful because you're able to not only pitch a Darkdramon, which is going to give you cards to draw for consistency, but it's also going to make it so that you get closer to your Darkdramon, so it makes it a very good card to just kind of play out. You can put a Sealdramon on top of it, or if you want to Digivolve into a Skullknightmon and start getting the going up into the DarkKnightmon, you can go with that, but overall just being able to draw 2 cards, pitch one of your D-Brigades, it just works really well. It's a card that when I was looking into it, I was kind of in between this or the Chumon. Chumon is a card that we will talk about here in a little bit, but the Hagurumon is what I chose just because I did want the consistency. I wanted some more draw. Obviously, when we look at some of the other cards in the deck, we do have some more consistency cards. We have the Pride Memory Boost, we have the Analog Boy, and so you're going to be able to kind of get that extra cycle going. But the thing is you can never have too much cycle in a deck like this, especially when you're trying to find specific pieces or you're just trying to get to that Darkdramon being able to pitch. So you could take out the Hagurumon if you wanted to, but it was a card that I like. I have been very impressed with it. Now, let's go ahead and get on into the champions. So we're going to be having the 4 Sealdramon, which is pretty standard. It's going to be a D-Brigade card as well as the blocker in the list, especially in the metagame we're going into with a bunch of hybrids. Having the blockers is really good. Sealdramon is a card that I didn't normally really like having in the D-Brigade list just because I like to be a little bit more aggressive with the D-Brigade, and the Sealdramon's a blocker, which makes it so you kind of it's less aggressive, obviously, but now we're going to be in a metagame where having a 6k blocker that is flows natural with your deck is going to be very good, and so very happy with the 4 Sealdramon. This is pretty staple. You probably wouldn't play less than 4 in a deck like this anyway, but now I feel like it has a lot more value than it did in previous metagames. Now we'll skip these 2 just for a second, and we're going to talk about the 1 Ogremon. The 1 Ogremon is just a card where I've been very impressed with it. You get to pitch a card to delete a level 4 or lower, which not only helps get rid of the elusive Mechanorimon, which is so strong against this deck, but it also can punish your opponent for just kind of playing something out, hoping that they can Digivolve on top of it later, while also being able to trash a card from your hand, which helps with the DarkKnightmon package as well as the Darkdramon, which we talked about before. So I found Ogremon to be very good, and I wanted to play it at 1. We will talk about this card a little bit more in the side deck, but this card is very good. I decided to play it at 1 in the main deck, just so way you can have that little discard, be able to get rid of something. It's just a card that does come up very often and has been very good. Then we're going to be playing these 3 Skullknightmon, the 3 Deadly Axemon, and the 4 DarkKnightmon. I decided to go with the 4-3-3 package here, just because with the DarkKnightmon, you can take them out of your trash, and we are going to be having a lot of cards that trash. We talked about the Ogremon, but there's also going to be the Pride Memory Boost and the Analog Boy coming up soon. And so you have the higher consistency of going these 2 and being able to play them from hand or trash. The 3 Deadly Axemon does search, but the thing is it's fairly weak, and so I kind of liked it more at 3 than 4. I think at 3 you're finding the same pretty much consistency that you would at 4. Obviously, you're not going to be able to sometimes put them underneath the DarkKnightmon as consistently because you are missing that 1, but I found being able to cut down to the 3 Deadly Axemon and 3 Skullknightmon gave us room for other cards that we wanted in the list, and I just feel like the DarkKnightmon is a little bit more impactful of a card, especially since a lot of times you're going to be on playing it, and so you're just going to be able to recycle these from your trash with the cards that you trash, or you can just go straight up from the Skullknightmon into the DarkKnightmon. So I decided to go with the 4-3-3 line here. And now, why are we really playing this line in this deck? And it's just because the DarkKnightmon, like I mentioned before, is kind of a go wide card. We have so many ways to gain memory in this list, being the Pride Memory Boost and the Tamers, that we are essentially able to gain a lot of memory in one turn. And so hard playing something for 7 isn't that big of a deal a lot of the times. And you're also going to be able to bring resources from your hand or trash underneath, and then when it gets deleted, you're going to be able to play them out and have more aggression. So this is just a very cool package that can go well with the D-Brigade, just so that way you can have that aggressive style going forward. But that's really all there is with the package. It's not anything too game defining or really game breaking. It's just something that really is a small package. We have the 4-3-3, which is just 10 cards, but it really does complement the type of deck that we are playing here, especially when we get into some of the later cards, including the Pride Memory Boost, which is obviously going to be very good. But we'll go ahead and talk about the 3 Darkdramon here. 3 Darkdramon is just very staple in my D-Brigade list. I don't really like ever playing it at 4. I find it way too clunky, so I just kind of always auto put it at 3 unless I find a list where I feel like I want to play it at 4. But never really had a D-Brigade list where I wanted to play it at 4, so just 3 because that is the number that I like. It's less clunky, but you're still going to see it consistently enough to be able to Darkdramon when you need to Darkdramon, especially with the cycle that we have in this deck. Then getting into our option cards, we're playing 2 Ultimate Flare and 2 Iron Fisted Onslaught, just removal, being able to have some sort of defensive back, because other than that, the only defense that we really have is things like the Sealsdramon and the Ogremon, which aren't the most impactful. So being able to have the Ultimate Flare to de-digivolve big things and clear wide, or being able to have the Iron Fisted Onslaught, which is something that is very good in things like Yellow Hybrid, for example, because both Shine, Sukuya, and Dynasmon are all 12 drops, so if they have multiple out, you can go ahead and Iron Fisted Onslaught away and get a very packful board wipe going on. I'm playing just 2 and 2 because I didn't want to clunk up too much. There are just times where you have cards in your hand, like multiple Darkdramon with these big cards, and you just kind of clunk super hard, so I wanted to kind of keep that down with this list. Since we have a more mid-range list, we could keep the clunkiness and the brickiness a little bit lower, and by having these 8-drop options be a little bit lower, I felt the list to be not as bricky when testing it out, and so I just wanted to go with 2 and 2. But Iron Fisted Onslaught is a card that we are actually having more of in the side deck, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Now the 4 Pride Memory Boost. This card is just insane in this deck. 4 drop, be able to reveal the top, play a 4 cost or less, which works with either our Skull Knight, our Deadly Axe, or any of our rookies, and then you get to delay later to gain memory. This card is something that when I saw it, I knew that this was going to be something that goes in a D-Brigade list, and with the Deadly Axemon and the Skullknightmon, you are going to be able to have even more consistency off this card, being able to hit high impact cards off the Pride, but you're also going to be having higher consistency of hitting your Deadly Axemon and your Skullknightmon because of the Pride Memory Boost. So this card just works really well with this whole deck. I wanted to play it at 4 because the consistency is so big. Playing for 4 memory isn't that big of a deal, especially when we're going to be able to gain memory later, and being able to gain memory by delay later means that you could sometimes play these DarkKnightmon without even passing your turn, or being able to do it while choking your opponent, and then set up for a very strong turn afterwards. So the Pride Memory Boost is absolutely insane. I wanted to play this at 4, tested it at 3, but decided to go to 4 because I wanted to see this at least like 2 times per game, and by having it at 4 with all the draw, you're usually going to have that happen. Then to finish off the list, we have the Tamers. Decided to go with the 1 Izzy just because I like to have that memory tamer. Make sure that you're at 3 no matter what, so that way if you want to or need to, you can go into the Darkdramon. Izzy and the analog are a little bit more reliant on what your opponent does, or if your Digimon gets deleted and store Izzy, you're just going to go to 3. You're going to be able to get your Darkdramon out. But then I also went with the 2 Izzy Joe just because, 1, this card is really good in this metagame because a lot of times people are going to be having 2 or more Digimon on the board, so you're going to be able to gain extra memory off this, and they'll stack on top of each other. Plus, if one of your Digimon dies on your opponent's turn, you get to tap these draw cards, so even more cycle, even more consistency. Just a very good card. I was playing this without the Izzy, and while I was playing 3 of the Izzy Joes, but I decided to go to the 1 Izzy just because there were so many times where if my opponent played around the Izzy Joe and just had 1 Digimon on board in a very crucial spot where I needed to have 3, I would fall very far behind, and so I decided to go with the 1 Izzy. Testing any more than 1 Izzy felt the Izzy to not be as impactful because once you have the first one out, you don't really want to ever play a second one, so you have a little bit lower of a consistency hitting this, but it's still just kind of I felt better than having the 3 Izzy Joes. You could play the 3 Izzy Joes or even play a third analog if you wanted to, but I found the 1 Izzy to be good for the 3 memory, and also being able to rearrange the top of your stack does help very well if you're trying to find a certain piece, or if next turn you're planning to Hagurumon or do the rare Commandramon. You can kind of curate what cards you're going to be able to get first, so you can kind of plan out your next turn. And then we're going to be having the 2 Analog Boy. This card is just very good in this deck because you're going to be having your DarkKnightmon out a lot, and once this dies, you're going to be able to summon 2 Digimon suspended, plus be able to gain a memory and hatch, and so the analog is really good. With the Pride as well, something that I forgot to mention is that it does trash cards. When you get to pick your 1 card, trash the other cards, and then the Analog Boy is also get to pick 1 card, trash the other cards, which works super well with this deck. Being able to get your D-Brigade into the trash for your Darkdramon, great. Being able to sometimes get your Deadly Axemon or Scold Knightmon, so that way you can pull them out with the DarkKnightmon, great. Cards that just work really well with this package, and so I wanted to go with the 2 analogs here. I don't know if that's the exact perfect number, but that's just kind of what I've been testing. I haven't tested higher or lower, but that is something that you could consider when testing it if you want to go higher or lower. I usually seem to find this at least once a game. Some games I don't find it at all, but usually when I do find it, it does activate usually 1 or 2 turns per game, just because of the Nightmons. But that is going to be it for the main deck. As you can see, we are having the hefty 37 Digimon, 5 Tamers, and 8 options, and so it's kind of a little bit more Digimon focused, obviously, as most D-Brigade lists are, but in this type of metagame where a lot of decks are kind of more hybrid focused, this is going to give you that type of early game advantage or aggression to be able to go in early, and then you have a mid to late game plan, as well as you have the Ender and Darkdramon, and so I find this list to be one of the cooler D-Brigade lists that I've kind of play tested and worked with so far, just because most of the other D-Brigade lists that play kind of mid-range where you have ultimates have felt relatively weak. The Tankstramons haven't been that great. I've tried the Gagamamons. They haven't been that great either, as to where the DarkKnightmon just kind of feels like a card where it's a 10 card package that you can fit in your D-Brigade that doesn't really take away from it, and then you can play cards like Pride Memory Boost, which work really, and Analog Boy, which work really well with the D-Brigade, but aren't really the best cards in just D-Brigade, but work really well because of the DarkKnightmon package, and so it all kind of glues together and works really well, and so I hope you all enjoy this main list, but let's go ahead and get on into the 10 card side deck. Alright, so as you can see here, we have our 10 card side deck, and this is what I decided to try out. I haven't really got to try too much with the side decking, just because I found it to be very hard to do with the online simulators, but I did put a decent amount of thinking into what cards could be good in the format to make this side deck. So if you are trying this list, this is a very good base side deck to start with, but obviously you can make more tweaks and changes as the cards actually get released to us and we can get more proper testing. But I'll go ahead and go through this, let you know what the reasoning is for each, starting off with the Chumon. Starting off with the 3 Chumon, mostly because, as I was talking about in the main deck, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to play the Chumon or the Hagurumon. I opted for the Hagurumon for the cycle and the consistency, but the Chumons are very good in the metagame because there are a lot of ways to gain memory. The hybrid decks are going to be able to get a lot of memory gain off the Bokomon, so this is very nice here. There's also just the memory boost, Hammer Sparks, there's various ways to gain memory, so the Chumon is very good, so I found this to be a nice side card to be able to tech in versus the hybrid decks, or just any blue style deck, because they will also have a lot of memory gain as well, and so you could, like I said, you could have put this in the main deck if you wanted to. I opted not to because I found the Hagurumon to be more impactful 4 out of 5 times, but the Chumon is very good in specific matchups, so if you're playing against the blue hybrid or the yellow hybrid, I definitely liked having these in there, so that way you can slow down the Bokomon, slow down the deck a little bit, but for the most part, versus a lot of other decks, it's not as impactful as the Hagurumon, so I decided to keep it as a side deck card, but that's going to be the main reason. It's just a nice rookie to have out there, kind of sit on the board while you kind of get your combo going, so you slow down your opponent just a little bit, but that just a little bit of slowdown is usually enough for you to be able to stabilize yourself and actually have a real game going instead of just getting rushed out. Alright, let's go ahead and talk about the defensive cards that we have, which are going to be the 3 Mechanori and the 1 Magnadramon. Decided to go with the Mechanori because in a lot of matches you can find decks that are a little bit more aggressive than you, and so being able to side this in gives you that 1, 2, 3 extra turns to kind of find the pieces that you need and catch up to your opponent. And so I think Mechanori is going to be a card that is going to be in a lot of side decks for a lot of lists just for that specific reason. Does work really well versus those aggressive decks, and any deck can really get aggressive depending on how you build it, and so Mechanorimon's just a really good slot. Decided to play it at 3 over 4 because I don't think you're ever really going to need 4 Mechanorimon, especially with the cycle in this list, and especially because you can play it off of the Pride Memory Boost, and so This is a card that could potentially fit in the main deck just like the Chumon, but it's just barely not good enough to make in the main deck in my opinion, but it's still good enough to where you're going to want to play it in multiple matchups. And this is where the side deck comes in. There's going to be cards that maybe without the side deck you would put in your main deck, like the Mechanorimon, but since we do have the side decks, you can go ahead and not play it in the main deck and then just side it in for game 2 and 3. And the one Magnadramon is just a card that I found to be very good versus pretty much every single matchup. You're able to gain a lot of memory in this list with things like the Izzy Joes, the Izzy, as well as the Pride Memory Boost, or even the Analog, so you can be able to boost up pretty high and be able to play the Magnadramon while putting your opponent at minimal memory and make it so that way they lose 1 to 2 turns of aggression just by being able to recover up those 1 to 2 security. And it's also just kind of just a stabilization card. It's just something that there was multiple times where I was testing where I was like, well, I'd really like to have a recovery card right here, and so what recovery cards are really going to fit in the list? There's not a lot, so I decided to go with the Magnadramon, and has been very good. This is probably the weakest card in the side deck in my opinion, but it is a card that I found to be useful in basically every single matchup. You could side this in versus a lot of matchups outside of maybe some of the slower matchups, which is why it is a side deck card, but versus this current metagame where there's going to be a bunch of hybrids swinging in, being able to play out the Magnadramon, especially if you pair it with the Mechanorimon, can give you a lot of time to be able to start get your Knightmon package going, or just go in with the Commandramons, and everything is just about giving the Commandramons and the Darkdramons a little bit more time that they need to get that aggression to go for game. And so our defensive cards are just specifically that. Give us a little bit of time, get to our win condition. Next, we're side decking 2 more Ogremon. We have 1 in the main deck, but I like Ogremon as a way to be able to pop the Mechanorimons that I'm expecting to see a lot of in the side deck format. I wanted to play 1 in the main deck, mostly because it does have the trashing feature, which is good in this, but also it does give you an out in the main deck, and so you don't just kind of... You won't necessarily lose to Mechanorimon if they play it because you have the DarkKnightmons and stuff, but it does give you a little bit more help in the game 1, and then when you can side deck, you get to 3 Ogremon. Again, I just don't really see playing 4 of this card being useful or necessary, so side decking 2 so that way you could go up to 3 and you're going to have pretty good consistency, and you're never really going to be able to need to really get over more than 2 Mechanorimons to really go for game, because there's going to be a lot of times where you can go wide on board, play the Ogremon, boost up with the Pride, play the Ogremon, clear off the Mechanorimon, and just try to swing in, and that's kind of the idea. And so we just want to up the consistency of this in the side deck without really diluting the main deck power by having 3 of them in there. But like I said, this is mostly just for the Mechanorimon, but it works versus any blockers, or if your opponent's just playing cards that leave out champions that are annoying to get rid of, like let's say 8mon or Octomon, which have really high DP, you can go ahead and just play out the Ogremon, trash one of the cards which are going to be beneficial for you later anyway. You get a body on board and you get to pop their card. Then the last card of our side deck is going to be the 3rd Iron Fisted Onslaught, and we have 2 in the main list, but the reason I decided to play the 3rd one is because of Yellow Hybrid. I expect it to be fairly popular, and being able to have Iron Fisted Onslaught to pop multiple Digimon on the board, mostly the Dynasmon, is going to be really good, and it doesn't have the downside of which Ultimate Flare has of being essentially giving them their Tamer back, because you're going to de-Digivolve it down back to a Tamer. It goes back, and then they just get to go back onto another hybrid with it. So the Iron Fisted Onslaught I found to be a little bit better, and so I just wanted to go ahead and play the 3rd one to up that consistency. The blue hybrid and the yellow hybrid I felt like were the 2 main decks that I kind of wanted to focus towards, while also having some sort of side deck options for other more aggressive decks. And so I found this 10 to be fairly good, and so like I said, this is going to be a good spot for you to start for your side deck. But let's go ahead and talk about what you would consider siding in for these cards. So we're going to go ahead and look at the main list and talk about the side deck. Let's go ahead and start with the 3 Chumon here. What cards are you going to want to take out to put in? Well, the first idea is what we talked about, is you could take out the Hagurumons, because it would be an easy 3-to-3 swap while keeping the same rookie count, and not really changing too much. Obviously this is a consistency card, but if you find that to not be very necessary, you want to put in those Chumons, those memory blockers instead, this is a very easy slot to take out. Then we're going to have multiple slots throughout the deck that you can really take out for just about anything depending on what you need to put in, and that's the first one's going to be the 1 Ogremon. The 1 Ogremon is just there as a tech, and so you can kind of take it out if you find it to be not useful. You can put it in for really anything. So if you wanted to not take out all of your Hagurumons, could go ahead and take out one of the Ogremons. The same thing with the Izzy. The Izzy is a 1-of tech as well. If you take it out, there's a chance you weren't going to see it during that game anyway, and so you can replace it for something else that can be searched off of either the Pride or the Analog instead of it being a Tamer, and so you can put the Chumons in those slots. And so these 2 slots are going to be just kind of flex for the entire side deck, depending on where your opponent's going to be anyway. And then also the 4th Dark-Knightmon is also going to be flex, because you can go to a 3-3-3 package and have relatively the exact same consistency without too much happening. So really, your combination for the Chumons are going to be the 3 Hagurus and your 3 1-of flex slots. So you could either take out 2 of these and maybe 1 of these, or you could just take out these 3, leave the Haguru, go up to 22 rookies. It's really up to you, but these are kind of flex spots, so you can do whatever you really need to there. Next up, we'll go ahead and talk about the defensive package, which is going to be the Mechanorimons and the Magnadramons. Like I said, you have your flex spots with the Ogremon, the Dark-Knightmon, and the Izzy, so you can go ahead and play it there. But when you are playing defensive cards, the reason is because you're usually playing versus a deck that is a little bit more aggressive than you, so you want to consider taking out cards that are slightly slower, which is where you can take out 1 to 2 Pride Memory Boost, because Pride Memory Boost is a card that you kind of have to play out for 4 to play something, but you could hit something that's not as impactful. For example, you could play Pride and the only thing that you hit is the 2-drop Commandramon, and then you played 4 to essentially play a 2-cost Digimon, so that could happen. And so versus aggressive decks, you can take this out just because it is a little bit slower. And then also you can take out the Iron Fisted Onslaught, because Iron Fisted Onslaught is just a very big commitment for something that is probably just a bunch of rookies or champions. That's where Ultimate Flare is going to be a lot more impactful. So when you're looking to take out for the Mechanoris and the Magnadramons, I would look at the flex spots that I mentioned, as well as the Iron Fisted and the Prides. Mostly everything else you kind of want to keep intact versus that, because being able to go with the Skull Knightmons and the Deadly Axemons, they are relatively cheap while being able to have decent impact. The Ogremon is a card, like I said, it's a flex spot for any of them, but it's going to be a little bit more powerful versus aggressive decks, because it's going to be able to delete something while putting a body on board. So those are going to be your slots to side in there. It's really going to depend on what your opponent is playing and how you feel about what kind of cards that you need going into the matchup. One thing to note is, like I said, you could take out the Hagurumons for the Chumons, but if you're not putting in more rookies like the Chumon, I wouldn't really recommend getting rid of any of the rookies, because you're only at 19, which is obviously a lot, but for a D-Brigade style list, it's really not that much. You would much rather have the 19 count instead of going down to 16 to add in the other cards. So that way you can have that aggressive, that rookie rush package, as well as just the Hagurumon. If you're not replacing it for a rookie, you're losing consistency by losing draw power, and also ways to be able to pitch your D-Brigades. So I'll just go ahead and keep those untouched. Next, we'll go ahead and talk about the Iron Fisted Onslaught. Now, for the Iron Fisted Onslaught, it's going to be very interesting, because when it comes to Iron Fist Onslaught, it is an 8-cost option, which means that we already have 4 in the main deck, and so if you don't take out an Ultimate Flare, you're going to be at 5 8-cost options, which can be very bricky, unfortunately. And so a lot of the times I would consider taking out an Ultimate Flare. Like I said, versus the Yellow Hybrid matchup, Iron Fist Onslaught a lot of times is going to be more powerful, but if they do play out some of their 3-cost of the white rookies, you can clear them out. But for the most part, whenever you put in Iron Fist Onslaught, you're going to be wanting to take out the Ultimate Flare, just so you don't have too many 8-drop option cards. You could also consider one of the Pride Memory Boost or one of the Izzy, so that way you just kind of don't clunk up on Tamers and options as hard. If you really feel like you need the 2 Ultimate Flares still, and go up to the 3rd. But for the most part, like I said, you should probably just cut down on the Ultimate Flare when siding this, so that way you don't brick super hard by just opening 2 Iron Fisted Onslaught, Ultimate Flare, and you're just like, no, you're like, the consistency of the 8-drop options are just going to be a lot higher at 5 instead of 4, so that's going to be up to what deck you're playing against. But like I said, when you're mostly teching versus Yellow Hybrid with this, you're probably going to be taking out the Pride, potentially the Izzy. And then last but not least, the 2 other Ogremons. Now with the 2 Ogremons, the reason I left this one for last is because this one's going to be a little bit more interesting, and when I was thinking about exactly what you're going to side, it wasn't as easy to pick, because when you're putting in more Ogremon, that means you're obviously not going to take out your Ogremon, because you want more of them. So that flex spot gets lost, and so you still have the Dark-Knightmon flex spot, and you still have the Izzy flex spot. But something that I was also considering is that if you're playing the Ogremon, sometimes you can get rid of the Pride Memory Boost or one of the higher cost option cards depending on the matchup, because you're going to be able to trash your Ogremons, or you're going to be able to trash with the Ogremons, and you're going to be able to get your Deadly Axemon and your Skull Knightmons in trash a little bit faster, a little bit better. And so sometimes you don't need the Pride Memory Boost, because then you can just play the Dark-Knightmon, recur them back from the trash underneath, and then you'll be okay. But I think for the most part, if you're putting in these 2 Ogremons. Like I said, it's really hard. You're probably going with your 2 other flex spots, but I think you could also consider taking out 1 Pride or maybe one of your 8 cost options, just depending on the deck and the reason why you're playing the Ogremon. If you're playing the Ogremon because you're playing against something that has a bunch of Mechanorimons, then maybe taking out something like Ultimate Flare is going to be a little bit better, because in that case, you're not really going to be able to get as much value off of Ultimate Flare. Or if you're playing against aggressive decks like Rookie Rush or something like that, and you want those extra Ogremons, you can go ahead and consider taking out the Iron Fisted Onslaught, just because they're probably going to be at different play cost ranges and not going to be as consistent of a board wipe as Ultimate Flare. Or if it's another aggressive Rookie Rush style deck, you can take out the Prides just because they are a little bit slower, like I kind of talked about with the Mechanorimon and stuff. And so that's really up to you and what deck you're going to be playing. Those are just the general ideas of what you want to side out. It's really going to come down to us testing it and you getting the general idea of what decks are going to be better to side against, and what cards are going to be weaker to side against. But overall, this main deck as well as the side deck have been pretty cool for me. I do like them. Unfortunately, I couldn't have tested the side deck as much as I wanted to, but I still think that going into it day one, testing out the side decks, I would go with a side deck starting like this and then make changes as I kind of made some more discoveries. So I think this is going to be a very good spot. It does hit some of the weaknesses, as well as it does hit just teching towards some of the more important matchups while still maintaining a highly consistent main deck. And so even if you lose your main deck one, if you side into some cards like Chumon, Mechanorimon, even the Ogremons, and all these cards can make very high impact in the matchup. And so it's really crazy to think about having side decks in Digimon and the impact that's going to take. So I'd go ahead and start with this, but I'm going to go ahead and get on out of here. I hope you enjoyed. I'm going to be bringing you even more BT7 content, both deck lists and matches, coming very soon, as we're going to be getting the cards starting basically this weekend with pre-releases. As soon as people start building decks, I'm going to be getting matches, and as soon as I can build more decks and test more in person, I'll be able to bring you more refined decks here on the channel. So if you enjoyed, be sure to like and subscribe so you can get notified when those go live. But with that being said, I'll catch you all next time. Have a great day. Peace out.